Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony, which today commemorates the 80th anniversary of the Allies declaring war on Germany. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Jason Law. On the 3rd of September 1939, Prime Minister Robert Menzies announced Australia's involvement in the Second World War. In a broadcast carried by every national and commercial radio station in Australia, he announced, "Fellow Australians, it is my melancholy duty to inform you officially that in consequence of persistence of Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that, as a result, Australia is also at war." It was just over 20 years after the end of what was then known as the Great War, the war to end all wars, a global conflict in which 13 million people died. With this carnage and tragedy still so close, many in Europe had been desperate to avoid further tragedy and carnage. Britain had done much to avoid another war, leaving Nazi Germany's military forces to rearm and expand, annexing Austria and then occupying Czechoslovakia. The authoritarian nationalism of the Nazis created a dictatorship in Germany and led to genocide on a hitherto unimaginable scale. With the German invasion of Poland on the 1st of September, Menzies argued, forces had to be resorted to check the march of force, honest dealing, the peaceful adjustment of differences, the rights of independent people to live their own lives, the honouring of international obligations and promises, all these things are at stake. The Second World War involved more than 1 million people from more than 30 countries. More than 60 million people died. Almost 1 million Australian men and women served in the war. More than 40,000 of them would die in service to our nation. Few could have imagined that victory would come at such a terrible cost. It announced the end of the war in August 1945. Prime Minister Ben Chifley said, "Let us remember those whose lives were given that we may enjoy this glorious moment and may look forward to a peace which they have won for us." Today, we remember and honour all those Australians who served during the Second World War. We're honoured to acknowledge Mr. Peter Cook-Russell, representing the Naval Association of Australia. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Blaney Public School, Tacoma Public School, Burragul Public School and Telegraph Point Public School, and from Victoria, McKellar Primary School. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Careful party, attention! Careful party, present on.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, of beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains and let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Careful party, shoulder on. Careful party, order on.
Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway lands. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flight Lieutenant John William Allsop. John Alsop was born on the 7th of January 1914 in the Melbourne suburb of Burnley, the son of Charles and Agnes Allsop. He grew up in Melbourne, attending Essendon State School and then Essendon High School before going on to Melbourne University and working for a period as a spare parts salesman. He was an active sportsman, playing lacrosse, Australian rules football, golf, swimming, tennis and badminton, as well as being involved in dancing and card games. On the 20th of January 1936, less than a fortnight after the 22nd birthday, Allsop enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force. He was appointed to training squadron at No. 1 Flight Training School at Point Cook. After graduating from Point Cook, he was transferred to the Royal Air Force on short-term commission, leaving for England on the 5th of January 1937. In England, he was attached to No. 10 Squadron, which was located at RAF Station Dishforth in North Yorkshire, and was part of the newly created No. 4 Group of Bomber Command. On the 11th of December 1938, Allsop married his sweetheart, Eva Halia, who had joined him in England. On the 3rd of September 1939, Prime Minister Robert Menzies announced on national radio that Australia was at war with Germany. As a result of this declaration, Australia raised a volunteer force, the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, and the Australian government sent the Royal Australian Air Force crews and a number of Royal Australian Navy ships to fight for Britain. Some of the early missions involving the Royal Air Force were leaflet drops over Germany. While attitudes towards the propaganda raids were negative, the Air Council believed in their value for reconnaissance and training. On the night of the 1st and 2nd October, 3 Armstrong Whitworth Whitney aircraft, British twin-engine medium bombers from No. 10 Squadron, were the first British aircraft of the war to fly over Berlin. Weather conditions were severe. One aircraft was over the German capital when its oxygen supply momentarily failed. 2 of the crew collapsed and part of the mechanism of the rear turret froze so that the air gunner could not open his door. The pilot managed to carry on while the navigator went back to assist the unconscious crew members. The aircraft, piloted by Flight Lieutenant John Allsop, was cruising off the coast of Scotland when it disappeared into the North Sea. Despite extensive air and sea searches, no trace of the aircraft or its crew were ever located. Today, all 5 are commemorated on the Runnymede Memorial to Airmen with no known resting place. Pilot Officer Alan Gordon Salmon, Aircraftman First Class John Rogerson Bell, Aircraftman First Class Alfred Francis Hill, Leading Aircraftsman Fred Elson, and Flight Lieutenant John William Alsop, who was 25 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his name listed on the Runnymede Memorial in England is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Lieutenant John William Alsop, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Principal party, shoulder, arms.
They shall grow not old as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Principal party, present, arms.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Rifle party in Worthington. Rifle party, quick march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys and students, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.